Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. You know, I've spent my entire career studying economic systems, capitalism, and the ways governments respond to crises. And what we're witnessing right now with Trump's announcement of a new immigration crackdown following the National Guard attack is not just another policy shift. It's a textbook example of how crisis becomes opportunity for those in power. So let me ask you this: when chaos erupts, who really benefits from the crackdown that follows? Let me be very clear from the outset. Any attack on National Guard personnel is absolutely condemnable. Violence against anyone, particularly those serving in uniform, deserves our unequivocal condemnation. But here's what we need to understand as critical thinkers and engaged citizens. The response to such an incident tells us far more about the priorities of our political system than the incident itself, and what we're seeing unfold is a familiar pattern, one that should deeply concern anyone who cares about democracy, human rights, and economic justice. The Trump administration has seized upon this tragic incident to announce sweeping new immigration enforcement measures. Expanded detention facilities, accelerated deportations, increased militarization of the border, broader surveillance powers. Now, stop for a moment and think about this. Does this response actually address the root causes of what happened? Or does it exploit a moment of public fear and anger to advance an agenda that was already waiting in the wings? I think we all know the answer to that question. Here's what they're not telling you on the evening news. Immigration is fundamentally an economic issue, not a security issue. People don't leave their homes, their families, their communities because they want to. They leave because economic policies, many of them driven by U.S. corporate interests and trade agreements, have destroyed their ability to survive where they are. NAFTA devastated Mexican agriculture. U.S.-backed coups in Central America created political instability that serves corporate extraction industries. Our war on drugs has militarized entire regions while doing nothing to address demand here at home. These are the actual causes of mass migration, but you'll notice they're completely absent from the current discussion. And let's talk about who really benefits from this crackdown, shall we? It's certainly not American workers, despite what you're being told. Study after study shows that immigrants, documented or undocumented, contribute more to the economy than they take. They pay billions in taxes, including into social security systems they'll never benefit from. They take jobs that Americans have systematically refused to do at the wages being offered. And here's the key point. Those low wages exist because employers know they can exploit vulnerable workers who have no legal recourse. So the real question we should be asking is this: why are we cracking down on desperate workers instead of cracking down on the employers who exploit them? The private prison industry is salivating right now. Detention facilities are big business in America. Every person detained is a profit center for corporations like Core Civic and Geo Group. These companies have spent millions lobbying for exactly the kind of policies Trump is now implementing. They donate to campaigns, they write legislation, and then they profit from the human misery that results. This is the definition of a perverse incentive structure, and it's operating at the highest levels of our government. Let me tell you what's really happening here, because the mainstream media won't connect these dots for you. We're living through late-stage capitalism's inability to provide decent lives for working people, so our political class manufactures scapegoats to deflect blame. Can't afford health care? Blame immigrants. Wages stagnant for 40 years? Blame immigrants. Schools underfunded? Blame immigrants. Never mind that the wealth of American billionaires has increased by trillions in the last decade alone. Never mind that corporate tax rates have been slashed while working families shoulder more of the burden. Never mind that we spend more on military contracts than the next 10 countries combined. No, the problem is definitely the family picking strawberries in California or cleaning hotel rooms in Texas. And here's another question worth asking. Where is the crackdown on corporate crime? Where are the mass arrests of executives who steal wages from workers? Where are the detention facilities for financial fraudsters who crash the economy? Why is a desperate mother crossing the border to feed her children treated as a greater threat to national security than the pharmaceutical executives who created the opioid epidemic, or the bankers who foreclosed on millions of homes, or the defense contractors who profit from endless wars? The National Guard attack is being weaponized, quite literally, to justify policies that will harm millions of people who had absolutely nothing to do with it. That's not justice, that's not security, that's collective punishment, and it violates everything America claims to stand for. We don't judge entire communities by the actions of individuals, except apparently when those communities are poor, brown, and powerless. I want you to think about something else too. This crackdown will require billions of dollars, billions. Money that could fund schools, repair infrastructure, provide health care, address climate change, or lift children out of poverty. Instead, it's going to militarized enforcement, walls, detention centers, and surveillance systems. Every dollar spent on this crackdown is a dollar not spent on actually improving the lives of American citizens. So when they tell you this is about protecting Americans, ask yourself, protected from what, and at what cost? The reality is that immigration has been used as a political weapon throughout American history. It's a pressure valve that politicians can turn whenever they need to distract from their failures to address systemic problems. Can't pass health care reform, start an immigration panic, economy not working for the majority, ramp up deportations. It's a tried and tested formula, and it works because it appeals to our worst instincts: fear, tribalism, the need for someone to blame when we're struggling. But here's what gives me hope, and why I'm standing here tonight talking to you. Throughout history, working people have always been stronger when they stand together across lines of nationality, race, and immigration status. The labor movement's greatest victories came when workers refused to be divided. Civil rights advances came when coalitions formed across communities. Progress happens when we recognize our common interests and fight for them collectively. And our common interest right now is not in scapegoating vulnerable immigrants. It's in demanding an economic system that works for everyone, that provides dignity and security regardless of where you were born. The immigration crackdown being announced is not a solution to anything. It's a symptom of a political and economic system that has run out of answers to fundamental questions. How do we create an economy that serves human needs rather than private profit? How do we address global inequality without militarizing borders? How do we build democratic institutions that actually represent working people rather than corporate donors? These are the questions we should be asking, but they're being drowned out by manufactured panic and authoritarian posturing. So what do? First, we resist. We resist the normalization of cruelty as policy. We resist the dehumanization of desperate people. We resist the militarization of our communities and the expansion of the surveillance state. Second, we organize. We build coalitions between labor unions, immigrant rights groups, civil liberties organizations, and anyone else who understands that an attack on immigrants is ultimately an attack on all working people. Third, we educate. We tell the truth about why people migrate, who benefits from their exploitation, and what real solutions would actually look like. And finally, we imagine and fight for something better. We fight for an economy organized around human needs. We fight for foreign policies that don't create refugees in the first place, We fight for labor laws that protect all workers regardless of documentation. We fight for a society that measures its success, not by how many people it locks up or kicks out, but by how well it cares for everyone within its borders. The chaos following the National Guard attack is real, the grief is real, the anger is real. But the crackdown being announced is a cynical exploitation of that pain to advance an agenda that will solve nothing and harm millions. We've seen this playbook before, and we know where it leads. It leads to more suffering, more division, more injustice, and more power concentrated in fewer hands. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can choose a different path. We can choose solidarity over scapegoating. We can choose justice over cruelty. We can choose to build an economy and a society that actually works for everyone. That's the choice in front of us, and history will judge us by which path we take. Thank you for listening, and please don't just listen. Act, organize, resist, build the world we know is possible. That's our responsibility, and this moment demands nothing less from us. Thank you.